Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inventor 2023 Hot Topics and User Requested Editions. My name is Juliana, and I work in marketing here at MicroCAD. And today's presenter is Jim Dumont, our applications engineer. This webinar will focus on what's new in Inventor 2023, which is definitely worth 30 minutes of your time. We'll go over the newest features, and we hope this helps you to have a better overview of the newest release. Throughout the webinar, you can ask a question at any given point on the left-hand corner. You can ask Jim to revisit a step or ask any questions. This is your time, and we want you to make the most of it. And in the upper left-hand corner, you will find links to our social media, YouTube channel, and website. So we highly recommend you to check our YouTube channel in case you want to see all of our past webinars. We post all of them there at the end, so you can share with colleagues or rebudget it on your own time. And without further ado, we'll pass it on to Jim. Jim, you can share your screen now.
Liliana, thank you very much. I see Jeff is logged in over here. Good afternoon, Jeff. How are you? I'm going to share this screen right here. Okay, I can no longer see the on 24. Are we okay?
Yep, you're great.
All right, great, thanks. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I'm going to try to keep it within the time stated, about 30 minutes or so. Some of the information I will just talk about, and some of it I'll actually will demonstrate and talk a little bit about some of the things I found with it. But really what we want to do today is introduce the what's new, really the top new features of Inventor 2023. It won't be everything, but it'll be the top most exciting new features. So there are really 6 categories. Oh, sorry. I got to do not disturb that. There are 6 categories that we're going to cover during this presentation. And we're going to look first at like the general enhancements to this release. The interoperability, they've done some exciting things there. And we're going to cover Revit, Fusion 360, and some of the translation updates. And we're also going to look at some of the new features and enhancements to part files. In assemblies, we're going to talk about the bill of material, some 3D annotations, and a little bit more. Performance, well, that's always a key topic. Anytime I talk with anyone, they're always asking about, is it worth it? How good is it? And the thing is, if you're working with large assemblies, what you're seeing on the screen, those images, I actually have the Inventor models of that. It opens up very quickly. That's a true mining company, and their equipment, they're using Inventor, they're using Fusion to design and fabricate their machinery. So performance is always on the top of the list as far as important items. And Autodesk has focused a lot of attention, and they do with every release, to make it more productive and give you better performance when you work with those large assemblies. And in documentation, we'll look at ways of just documenting and annotating your drawings and your assemblies. So the first thing, once again, the home screen has been redesigned. We'll take a look at that quickly. The home screen has been going through some updates probably since Inventor 2015. So on the left-hand side, you have your project file you have access to, and you can open and create new files. What's really nice, though, and I really encourage this, is to go through the what's new, go through each aspect of the new features in the software. You have your help, tutorials, and also the community. If you've never accessed them, the forums are a great value as far as content, information, posting questions, answering questions. You might have some of us might have some free time. And if you see a question that came up that you might have an answer to, feel free to respond to it. You know, users like myself and others that are in today's session could really benefit from that. So you have your typical, I can see what I've used. I can look at it in thumbnail or preview, like list view and thumbnail. And for the status, if I hover over, now I'm using Vault. I have access to Vault and I'm logged in. It'll let me know that that file is not in the Vault. And some of them are. They might be old. So you have a little flyover, your tooltips, and this is really nice. The one thing I've never been crazy about, these little 3 buttons, your ellipses, when you click on that, you have settings. Well, if that's the only button, why not launch it, right? So you're gonna click on settings, and that gets into your project manager. So that is the home screen. All right. So finally, the navigation's been improved. Most of you struggle with this, I know I do, and the free orbit navigation has been improved. For instance, the full model, if the full model is in your view, the pivot point of the rotation is now the geometry center. If it's partially in view, the pivot point snaps to the nearest edge, face, vertex of the nearest component. If the model is outside of your view, the pivot point is your cursor location. So it's really been improved, but this is only for a 3-button mouse using the shift and the middle or the wheel button. If you're using your 3D connection or 3D mouse, it works the same way as it did all along. This is strictly just for the mouse. This is one of my favorites. I do a lot of iLogic, and they've really improved this. We can now add, if you've ever used it, if you haven't, let me mention this as well. So anything you see in this presentation, feel free to reach out to Juliana, myself. I think she's posted all of our emails and our contact information. If you need more information on any of these topics, iLogic is a big deal today. And having the external rules and forms, we can now add it to the ribbon, and I'll show you that in a second. The other one is the multi-value parameters. That's a big deal. We can now sort them. Typically, the order was the way that you created them, and that was fixed. Now we have the ability to sort. So inside of Inventor, let's go to this particular part file here. Actually, let's go to a drawing. Move over to this guy. So when you're in a drawing file, you have the ability, bring up my iLogic over here. Let's move this around a little bit. I'm a huge fan. I have my external rules over here. I have my global forms. I don't have any in this session right now. I haven't brought those over, but my rules. If there are particular rules that you use frequently, it's a really good idea to add them to the menu. If you have rules that are specific for your drawing views, instead of going through and navigating to run it, you can now add it directly to the menu. So a couple of ways that you can actually do this. It's real easy just to right click on your ribbon, customize. Now what this is going to do for you, because I'm in the context of a drawing and I'm on the annotate tab, anything I add will be strictly to the drawing annotate tab. If I want to add a command to, let's say, the assembly view, I could drop this down and choose where I want the actual program to be. It's not in every ribbon and every file, it's context sensitive, so it's going to be well aware of the type of file that you're in and the menu and palette that you located on. So from the drawing annotate, we now have iLogic rules, and I can take any one of these and add it. And I like to show the text, so it'll look something like this. And basically, you're going to put your most common commands there. And you do the same thing for forms. If you haven't used iLogic before, we have had the trigger. So under the manage, the trigger, but that only is good for one rule only. So now we can add multiple commands to the actual ribbon in the interface. The other thing I like is the ability for the parameters. I use a lot of multi-value parameters when I do my programming in iLogic. We can now do the custom sort. We can take them and move them up to get the order that you want, get the most common elements or the common selections at the top of the list. Just makes life a lot easier. Little things like that just go a long way when you're doing some programming and for user when I interface with the program. Okay. So ray tracing. I'm not sure if many of you have done this. In the past, we've had ray tracing capabilities, but it's been CPU ray tracing. 23 has now unleashed some new technology using your GPUs. We have some companies that have some really high-end graphics. We're now starting to take advantage of that when you're actually doing your ray tracing. let's see, I'll go over to my Inventor screen over here. So in the view, I'll go to realistic. And then once I click on ray tracing, you typically will see this. This is your default ray tracing interface, and you'll see that it's set for CPU. This will go through, and what happens is if you rotate your model, it'll start over. So you want to get everything kind of set the way that you want it, and let this run until you get to a certain fidelity that you like, and then you can actually save it. So I'm going to shut this off, and now what you do is under Tools, Application Options, in the hardware, you can set it to GPU. Now I'm using the GPU ray tracing. You will get better performance. This is in a pre-release state, so Autodesk is definitely looking for some feedback. If you've used Inventor Studio, that is still using the Autodesk ray tracing, which is called ART. It's basically just Autodesk Ray Tracer. So right now, the model and the part file environment are using the GPU if you set it to that. So you will get, again, better performance, better capabilities. However, not every graphics card is supported. In your help menu, you will actually find something like this. Let's see, I think it's right here. This will give you your GPU requirements. Most of the newer cards support it. Most of the NVIDIA, like some of the GeForces, but definitely the Quadros will support it. Like for instance, any graphic card that starts with an RTX will definitely be supported, and also with laptops and mobile platforms. And some of the AMDs will work as well. So it gives you a good list of the the graphic cards that are supported. Okay. Interoperability. So a lot of work has been done for Revit users. They want to share their data with Inventor for custom fabrication. So Inventor, it's had the ability to open up Revit data all along. However, it gets kind of busy and muddy. You can't really segregate very much what you want to open. It opens up the Revit model. A lot of times the model has to be shared with you. They email a portion of it, and then you actually have to open it and work with it. If there are any changes that are made, the whole process starts over. So now with this,
sorry, we have a question.
Sure.
Says Jeff, Studio can use the graphic card?
Inventor Studio, the rendering does not make use of the GPU. It only uses the CPU, the Autodesk ray tracing. It does not. Autodesk has not committed to it, but they say they may add the GPU to the Inventor Studio in the future. It could even be in an update. Let's say Inventor 2023.1 or .2 may include it, but right now it doesn't support it.
Thank you, James.
Sure. So with the interoperability with Revit, I had a colleague actually share some data with me from a Revit model. I don't actually have Revit on my computer. So I'm going to switch over to Inventor. And in the Collaborate, we have a new data exchange. So Douglas, who's one of our colleagues, he took a Revit model and he shared it with me in the AutoCAD docs. Basically, it's just a web portal, and he gave me permission to actually view and see the information that's out there. These are the subsets of the Revit model he created for me for my use today. And what's nice about this, instead of having a multi-story building, I may only be working on a factory floor. I might have some equipment that I want to see. How does it fit? Do I have any clearance issues? What's going on? But if I look at something like this, and I do a preview, this will show me exactly, before I load it, what it is. And if I think this too much, maybe I only need this area right here, I can let my colleague know that my area of interest, and he can create another subset for me. Less data means more productivity. It doesn't take as long to load. But I'll use what I have right now, and I'll load it. So it's going to take that Revit model, and it's going to bring it into an assembly file, and I can work with it. I can create models off of it. I can select faces. I can constrain to it, all kinds of things. and it really doesn't matter. So it gives me a really good ability to work with Revit, geometry inside of Inventor. Today, more and more people are doing cross disciplines. They're blending, merging the AEC and the manufacturing very tightly. And as you can see, get my little coffee out of the way here. And it really doesn't matter the size of this. I can bring in the entire building and everything just works very quickly. I'm going to place an assembly, a little equipment that I have over here. We have some companies that are putting like decks, metal, fabrication, welding onto buildings. We have a company in New York that actually took a penthouse in New York, and they took one of the walls and made it rotating so that the people can actually have an outside view. So the ability of taking a Revit model in and utilizing it to design around, it just works really well. So this particular assembly has a lot of annotations in there. These are just 3D annotations. If you're not aware of this, there are shortcuts to shut that off under the view, object visibility, welds. Don't need to see that. So now what I'm going to do is just constrain it. I'm going to take this, the bottom of that, and just put it on the floor. And everything works. It's real geometry that I can use. I can then take this and I can move it. I could locate it from a wall, identify where it's going. It's not the best case scenario, but in the time that we had, Douglas, this is the only model he was able to get for me to work with that we did not have any issues with intellectual property, or we did not have to have an NDA for this. So that is the great interaction between, or interoperability between Revit and Inventor. Now, if this model were to change, this wall were to move, it would update directly inside of Inventor. I would actually be notified that there's a change pending. I would simply just refresh it and it would update accordingly. So the interoperability has been fantastic between these two disciplines. The one I really like is Fusion. A lot of times I've been asked this question so many times. I have the product design collection. It includes Fusion. Can I use it? Up until about a year or so ago, not really. So the generative design has been very useful, but also the manufacturing now. We have a lot of companies that have, say, let's say 4, 5, 6 seats of the product design collection, and they might have 1 or 2 CNC operators. They're not going to author any geometry, they're going to machine. So instead of using the Inventor with the Inventor CAM, Fusion might be a better solution for them with the manufacturing extension that's built into it. It has a lot more capabilities. So if I design and model an Inventor, how do I get that information to my CNC operator who may be using Fusion? And what about if I make any changes or iterations? I'm using Vault Professional, I'm revising. How does that information get to the user? So with this workflow, this particular part file, actually, let me shut this off. That's been running in the background. Disable that. Now into the Fusion 360, I have the ability to share this model with my Fusion operator, and I can do it in various ways. If they're going to be doing structural or fluid analysis, stress analysis, maybe doing 3D printing, but I'm going to do subtractive machining. This is my little panel for me to share this. It's very similar to sharing a view with someone outside of the company. It's just preparing the model. I'm going to specify in my Fusion data panel, where is this model going to go? I'm going to put it in the MTC team folder, and I'm going to just hit upload. That's it. Now, if I want to, I can just quickly open it up in Fusion 360. And once I have the model inside of Fusion, I can start doing my CNC. I can switch over to the manufacturing and start applying my setup, my tool paths, and my machining process. Should be just about loaded. There we go. It automatically switched to my manufacturing environment, already brought me into my setup. I can start determining the stock and then start going from there. For the sake of time, I've already started one. I'll switch back over to Inventor. So this particular part right here has been designed, it's been sent to Fusion. And I'll open this part up inside of Fusion. It adds a new folder into your model browser. It gives you quick access to the environment. I guess Fusion is already open. It didn't switch to Fusion. I did open because Fusion was open in the background. It opened it, but it didn't set that to be the focus. So there it is. Here it is here. And right now, if I look at my simulation, my screen sharing is always in the way. Put that over here. So I just added a few tool paths. I got some facing and some pockets that are going on here. So I'm leaving material. I'm just doing some adaptive clearing. And now I'm actually going to finish the pockets to size. Now, if I go back to Inventor and I decide to make some changes to this, so I've just changed the wall and even changed the depth. I'll save this, and as soon as I switch back over to Fusion, or if my CNC operator was working in it, I'm sorry, I saved it, but what I forgot to do is tell my operator that I've updated it. All I have to do is upload new version. Because what I don't want to happen is every time I'm modeling and editing, and every time I save it, is to post it. I want to post it when I'm done my editing and I'm ready for him to actually work on it. So I'll right click, upload new version. That's done. Switch over to here, and he's going to get a lot of notifications. Hey, your model's out of date. I'm going to switch back over to the design environment, update my model. It's completely associative. Anything you do in Inventor will display inside of Fusion. So it's updating it. I'll switch back over to manufacture. You can see my toolpaths are out of date. I simply generate the new ones because the geometry has changed. And we're all set. Simulate. And it maintained the updates to the Inventor file directly inside of Fusion. So we have great connectivity now with certain aspects of it. So the Fusion 360 has generative design, which Inventor does not have. And the manufacturing, even though Inventor CAM has it, most CAD operators are not doing the CNC. They're usually dedicated users, and having Fusion as an option for them and to be able to work directly, interactively, and associatively is the way to go. So that is the Fusion 360 interoperability. When we start talking about canvas data, basically all this is, and I don't have an example to show you, if you're doing electrical designs inside of Fusion, you want to bring that into Inventor. We now have the ability to bring in with a better fidelity using meshes, and it brings it in a lot cleaner than it used to in the past. And there's just been some new import-export files. I won't get into every one of these, but the steps, the STLs, they're not new. They've just been enhanced a little bit for the step file, better performance. The GLTF, I've actually not used that myself, but it's an open source format. It's supposed to store the model, the scenes, and some of the animation data. So these have been updated. So Autodesk is always working at these import-export translators. So for the part modeling, they finally added something new. And I've been asked this question many times, what do we do about laser etching? I just finished a project just like 4 or 5 weeks ago that I could have used this. We were rolling some 5/8 plate steel, and I had to show an etch area that after it was rolled had to be cut. So the etching would have been really handy to do this. So we can do it for laser marking, etching, engraving, and it also has styles that make use of when you do DXF and DWG exporting. And we also have some style controls. Let me show you how this works. So this is just a sheet metal part file. It's got a sketch over here. And then when I look at my styles, we have something new in here when you're looking at part files. It's now a mark. And mark has what they call a surface. So the etching will not pass through the entire surface, and through does. And what you're looking at is the export. What's going to happen when you export to a DXF? You have your layer and your line types that you can actually control. So what I want to do is I'm going to use my 3D model, and I'm going to mark this right here, this geometry right there. I'm going to use a surface, so it's not going to pass through everything. Okay, everything looks good, and I'm going to hit OK to this. So I'm showing my etching, and it does not pass through. Now, what I do want to show you is that if I look at my flat pattern, I can actually put information in here. Now, one thing I do want to show you is that this text represents the part number of the part file. And that's one of the new features, is that in text, you can now include your eye properties. So for my part number, everything will update. So now when you edit your text, edit my sketch first, you now have the ability to add eye properties and custom eye properties as text fields in your sketches and in your annotations. All right, so what I want to do here is, like, this might be using, like, say, an Arial font. I can't use that. Maybe when I'm engraving, I only want to use simplex. So I'm going to go into my styles. I'm going to take this surface style. I'm going to create a new one, and this will be text. So instead of being strokes or outline, I'm going to do strokes with a different font. I'm going to use simplex. Okay. Live presentation. It doesn't like characters like that. It didn't like it, but it still took it. I'm going to edit this. I'm going to rename it and get rid of the slash. I always like trying something new. Oh. I took it out of there, but it's not taking it. Okay, well, it took a little while to get out of there. Okay. All right, let's try this again. I'm going to close this. And get back into it. All right, we'll try this once more. That guy, new, and I'm just going to do text. There we go. And if I'm going to use that, the color, I'm going to change it to be maybe this color. And the line type is good there, and that looks okay. And through, it's going to use a dash space over there. Now, how this works, get back to my flat pattern. Definitely it's working good now. I'm going to go to my my flat pattern, mark. I'm going to select my text, and I'm going to choose the different surface. It's going to be, the different style. It's going to use the mark surface. It's not going to go through. And I'm going to use a text option, which means it's going to override or substitute the text. Actually helps if I finish the command, go back to my styles because it canceled out when I saved it. All right, I forgot this to go here and simplex. There we go. I'm going to delete this, same as before. I can keep my sketches. It works just like Inventor does. And let's go back to my flat pattern, my mark, text. There we go. It just swapped the text out. Now, when you typically do the plus sign, it'll typically give you the access to the sketch is now shared. The mark doesn't do that, so I got to talk to Autodesk about that. I have to go back into here, make the sketch visible, and then I can reuse it for this. So now if I go back to my mark, I'll select that line, and this time it'll be through. So now when I look at it, that particular etch goes all the way through. Sometimes when you're etching, you want to go through the geometry, and a lot of times we only want to be partial. So you can swap out whatever text the user is using to whatever text is appropriate for your engraver. And that is only in the flat pattern. It's the only time you'll see that, and it works really nice. When I take this and I do the save copy as, and this is different. We'll talk about this in a little bit when we get into the sheet metal. That is different than selecting that face and doing an export face as. There's different options. You right click on the flat pattern, save copy as. I can create a DXF or a DWG. Something new that they've added is when you create some of your flat patterns, some of your geometry, you might have a lot of splines. Those splines are difficult for some of your CNC. You can now do linear approximation and arc approximation and even group them into a single polyline. I can hear all the clapping in the background, right? If everything sounds good. All right, so now if I open this guy up and DWG, you can see that the layer, the color, the lines, everything is there. I didn't see the other part of it because I closed the file without saving, so my footprint is not there. That would have been a surface. It has its own color and line type. So that's what you're getting when you actually do a save copy as from the flat pattern versus selecting the face and then do export face as. They are different commands. Okay. All right, I think we're over here now. So for projected geometry, what's nice about this, if you have ever in a part file, you created a sketch and you project geometry from other components in your assembly and they get broken, that is a pain to actually clean up. So now you can simply just right click and delete those broken or orphan geometries or links. So they've improved that a bit. The other one I just showed you is we have the ability to add iProperties into your text, just like I did that in the text for the part number for that little engraving. So that was a nice little enhancement there. All right. So we have the ability, a lot of these things are not new. Extended information in your browser, like over here, this is not new, but they've now added this information to work with the sheet metal features so that if you're doing faces and flanges, I can see information about it. They call that extended information. All right, now, what I do like about what they've added to the sheet metal is the asymmetric extrusion for contour flanges. If you do sheet metal at all, I do quite a bit. You create a new file, I'll do sheet metal, and contour flanges, if you haven't used them, oh great. I'll sketch over here. And if I were to draw some geometry like this, now there's nothing to stop you from creating a face, then doing a flange, and then doing another flange. It's a little bit more work than if I just did a contour. Now when I do a contour flange, we now have asymmetric. Now the only negative that I see here, I don't have any drag arrows. I do have to put in the values. I can do 1 and 5, and I can swap them. But I just don't have any drag arrows for it, at least that I found yet. But having the asymmetric value or ability is big. Let's see. I'll go back to my flat pattern. And again, this doesn't really measure up, but when I go to a part file like this, and I do a save copy as, because I have a lot of curvature, it creates these really complicated splines when you output it. But having the arc approximation, I'll show you what that looks like. I've already taken the time to export it in the 3 different methods. So this is the standard spline that you would get in 22 and earlier. You're going to get things like that, complicated splines. We now have the ability to create lines. These are all separate line segments. And again, the little checkbox, it would make them as a single polyline. And this one I did as arcs. So if you were to list that, you know, these are all arc segments, which is a lot more pleasing when you're doing any kind of CNC work, nesting, you know, sheet metal punch and things like that. Okay. So for the part modeling, and the improvements there is the tolerancing for fillets. Again, that's not new. Tolerancing has been around for a long time. If you're doing a tolerance study, you want to look at either maximum or minimum material conditions, you can adjust it. So you might have a shaft that might have, you know, plus nothing minus 1,000ths, or a hole that might be, you know, plus 1 minus 0.5. You can set either to the maximum or their minimum or even the median size, and then do a tolerance study. How much interference do you have? And that works with the Inventor tolerance analysis. And the only thing they've added is we can now add tolerances to our fillets. Relationships, that's not new. You can right click on any feature and do relationships. It'll show you above and below how features are tied to each other. The only thing they've added here is that we can now do that on suppressed features. The extrude and revolve presets. Presets, if you haven't used those, they started in 2019 with the hole command. I would do a lot of 1/4-20 tapped holes. I like having the ability to have presets. Extrude and revolve now have the ability to have it in there as well. So if you've never used the presets, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, just to give you an idea. I'll do a new part file. They're off by default. If I sketch here, and I do extrude, it's like that by default. You just have to click on your little bars and unhide the presets. And whatever you do, you can actually save it as a preset in your preset settings. So all they're doing is they're making things more consistent from feature to feature. The presets, the inputs, the tolerances, all of that is finally getting more consistent. Now the visibility shortcut, they talk about a toggle. To me, a toggle is a little different. If I go to my assembly, let's go to this guy. So that's my work planes. That's a toggle. I can toggle not their visibility on or off, just can I see them, yes or no. So if I do alternate right bracket, I'm just going to toggle the visibility. Not new, it's been around for a while. I can do my user planes, I can do my origin planes. Now, alternate V doesn't do anything. That is a new shortcut. It's really weird because it doesn't do anything. But what you can do is I can select multiple components, and then I can do alternate V, and all it's going to do is going to toggle the visibility off. Now, You would think a toggle, I could do alternate V, would bring them back. It doesn't. What they did add is this new little selection in here. I can select all invisible components. Now I can do the alternate V, then brings them back. So it's not a real toggle, it's more of a switch. Assemblies. Any questions at this point? I think we're doing pretty good.
No questions so far.
We're a little over and I'm almost done. Okay, so for assemblies, those of you who have not used them yet, model states are kind of a big deal. For those of you that have not used them, most likely you're doing iParts or iAssemblies. So they're not replaced with model states. This is new technology that runs parallel. You have a choice to use either or. I'm not going to get into model states today because they're not new. They came out in 22, but they did add some functionality. So here is an assembly, and I go to my frame only, and basically I just suppressing components. Very similar to the levels of detail. So here's my primary, and here's my frame only. Now, what happens is if I go to my primary, I'm sorry, let's go to my frame only, and I look at my bill of materials, I'm going to see everything. I'm seeing 0 quantities. And if I do a parts list, that's what's going to display. What they've added in 23 is the new settings. I can hide, suppress components in my bill of material. So it's only going to show me what I need to see. Now, this little guy, to me, can be very dangerous. Renumber the items sequentially. So this is kind of funny. If I go back to my primary and I go to my bill of materials, I'm going to have 32 components. Now, I'm going to actually put this on, close this, and switch over to my drawing. Where are you? Let's move that closer to where I am. Okay. So I can see 32 items. And if I go to sheet 2, this looks like here. Now, I want to show you something. This part is item 2, and that's item 6. Inside of my assembly and my bill of materials, I turn this on, right? I switch over to the frame only. Frame looks good. Switch to my drawing. And so now if I do bill of materials, frame only is my model state. It's only going to show me what's in there. Balloon. That looks good. And that looks good. You have to be careful because if it's doing the resequencing, that could be a different item number when you do your different model states, when you switch in. If there's a big gap between where they are in the actual list, if I'm shutting a lot of components off, it could vary that. You just have to watch your renumbering because basically what it's doing is I've got 26 items here. I would like to be able to switch here. I can't. I actually have to close the BOM, switch to this model state, and then I can get back into it. It's going to show me 32. There's no gaps. It's just renumbering. It's the same thing as going into your renumber, starting with 1. So you can get into some trouble with that. So that's something you just want to watch out for, is that renumbering. You may or may not want to. If you do not have that on, you'll just have some gaps. When you go to this particular drawing, and if I sort it by item number, if you don't renumber, you may have some gaps. If you renumber, it'll be 1 through however many components you have with no gaps. That's all that's doing. And again, if you see anything here that you want more information on, feel free to reach out and we can do a little session and talk a little bit more about it. But my comment is just be careful with the renumber items sequentially. Okay. Now for the performance, they do talk about threads. This is, when I first read this, large amount of threads. Is that multi-threading? Is that using the processors, the CPU? It's actually truly threads. We have some companies that truly download everything from McMaster-Carr, and those are fully modeled threads. It will handle it a lot better in this particular release if you do that. Punch tools, again, it's all about improvements in large assemblies. Documentation. This one is really nice, is the ability for the model state and overlay views. If I'm going to create a new sheet. Actually, let's go back to this sheet, make life a little bit easier. I'm just going to change this view to my front view. And I'll scale this down a little bit. So typically, if you use overlays, they were only worked, or they only were useful if you did positions. So now we can actually use the model states. And it's great if you have machining processes. This is a new computer that I'm on. I don't have all of the files that I need to. I just want to show you how this works. Under overlay, when you select the view, I can actually put the primary on top of it, and it would look something like that. So you can dimension to it, you can see it. But in the past, we could only do this with positions, but now we can do it with model states. And the other thing that I really like is when you do detail views. Can't tell you how many times I've done this. It's circular, right? So when you actually do a view, you typically have to specify, what your fence is, circular or rectangular. So now we can actually edit the detail properties, and we can switch it dynamically on the fly. Little things, but again, it makes you more productive. Okay. And that's just going over what we saw, assemblies. And we're a little over. I do apologize for that, but I did have a lot of information I wanted to share with you. But in the end, really the thing to remember is there's a lot of information out there. There's us, there's MicroCAD. There's also the Idea Station. So if you have a request that you think Inventor or Autodesk should do, get online and fill it out. The Autodesk University, there's a lot of classes that are actually, it's coming up in September. This year, it's going to be live. It's going to be in New Orleans. So it's not going to be virtual. You definitely want to get access to this information. If you can't physically get there, there's a lot of the content, all of the content is recorded, and you have access to that after the fact. With that, I am over. I do apologize, but I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you found this useful. And we have a user group coming up in a few weeks, and that one will be more live. We're going to be doing something like Google Meets. Your cameras, everyone will be on. We'll be able to interact dynamically. This is more of a webinar today to get this information out to you. So I do look forward to getting some feedback, and I look forward to seeing all of you at our user group meeting coming up. I'm going to hand it all back to Liana, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jim, for that wonderful presentation. As a reminder for everybody, if you want to learn these topics in detail, you can always take a custom training with Jim or someone else on our team. We also offer group classes online. So be sure to be checking the MicroCAD website for future webinars. And that concluded our webinar today. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Jim. That was amazing.
Thank you very much.